In the heart of Snowdonia National Park, you might not expect to find a one-of-a-kind nuclear reactor, but that is precisely what you're looking at, nestled on the shores of Llyn Trawsfynydd.
The Trawsfynydd Nuclear Power Station is the UK's only inland nuclear reactor and is sited beside the artificial Llyn Trawsfynydd Lake, which acted as a cooling pond for the reactor, as well as a power source for Mentrog Hydroelectric Power Station. The reactor has been a source of great power, radioactive contamination, employment, and now stands to be a potential site for pioneering future new modular reactors. But before we get onto that, let's go back to the beginning.
Construction of the power station began in July 1959, and both reactor units were operational by March 1965. It officially opened in October of 1968, having cost £103 million to construct. In today's money, that's around £2.5 billion. These old photos taken during the construction are courtesy of the Mirrorpics archive and give an insight into the life of the workers who constructed the plant. The design was developed by Sir Basil Spence, a former major in the British Army and veteran of the D-Day landings. The Magnox reactors were CO2-cooled graphite-moderated reactors which vented into the atmosphere. This is an issue I will return to later. Water was supplied from Llyn Trawsfynydd. Each reactor unit contained a 15 metre by 8 metre core consisting of 280 tonnes of uranium each. Each reactor produced around 250 megawatt electric. By comparison, the modern reactor, Hinkley Point C, will produce around 3,200 megawatt electric. Here you can see the site plan, noting the outfall into the lake and the position of the reactor units. The Mentrog Dam was constructed around 1925 to impound water for the Mentrog Hydroelectric Power Station. The principal dam, crossing Avon Prysor at the northern end of Llyn Trawsfynydd, was in its time the largest arch dam to be built in Britain. The dam was 96 feet high and 37 feet at the base, the working head of water being around 630 feet. This image shows the dam in 1930. In 1988, construction work began on a replacement dam around 250 feet downstream of the original dam. This S-shaped dam is around 720 feet long and 130 feet high. And contains 55,000 cubic meters of concrete. During the 70s, the reactor's output had to be reduced by around 30% after inspection of other Magnox reactors in the UK revealed that the carbon dioxide gas used to cool the reactor cores was oxidizing key mild steel components within the pressure vessels of the reactor. Things were further complicated in the 1990s when testing showed that the integrity of the welding on the steel pressure vessels were degrading, putting the reactor at risk. Continual neutron irradiation makes the welds in the steel become brittle and therefore at risk of failure. These early reactors did not have an outer containment, and so any breach would vent directly into the environment. As a result, subsequent reactor designs were built with concrete pressure vessels to combat this and an outer containment. In addition, at Trawsfynydd, tie rods that secured the reactors had broken. It became clear that running the reactors at a reduced capacity would not be profitable, and ultimately the plant was shut down in 1991 after 26 years in operation. At this point, the lengthy and expensive decommissioning process began. It is anticipated that decommissioning will not be completed until 2083, 124 years after construction began. Some have described Trollsfinid as a dirty reactor, principally due to two main sources of radioactive contamination. Permits issued by Natural Resources Wales gave the Magnox plant permission to vent radioactive waste into the atmosphere via the stacks and liquid nuclear waste into the reservoir via an outfall. Firstly, owing to the gas cooling system, the reactor vents far more contaminants into the atmosphere than most other types of reactor. Dr. Chris Busby conducted an investigation into the impact of this venting. Prevailing winds at the site are southwesterly, and in a study which included around 90% of the population in the catchment area, he found that among women under 50, cancer rates of all types were 15 times higher, and in women over 50, rates of breast cancer were 5 times higher than expected. While this study was flawed in some respects, given it relied on testimony rather than objective medical records, it does raise concerns and should open the door to further research. Secondly, the site dumped radioactive waste into the Llyn Trollsfinid reservoir throughout the operational life of the plant, leaving a level of radioactivity in the sediment bed. Information signs at the lake boast of how around 60 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water pass through the plant every hour at its height of activity. The Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science conducted a comprehensive survey of the effect on the water, aquatic life and people in contact with it, such as fishermen. The site sees activities such as kayaking, wild swimming, fishing and walking, all of which are at risk of coming into contact with radiation. Their study found that people consuming fish from the lake double their risk of cancer. The greatest risks may be in the form of drought. In 1968, in Russia, Lake Karachi, a site where high levels of nuclear waste were being dumped, suffered a major drought, drying the lake up. As a result, winds blew highly radioactive dust from the lake's sediment over hundreds of kilometers of land, irradiating 500,000 people. Additionally, the Mentrog Dam is a concrete dam, and the lifetime of this structure will eventually come into question, and should a breach occur, sediment from the lake would be swept down the Afon Prysor, ultimately to the estuary. Despite these concerns, the lake is nonetheless a wildlife haven. With abundant wildfowl, fish such as trout and perch, larger mammals like otters, and those with a keen eye may be lucky enough to spot the ospreys that call the reservoir home. At the Mentrog Dam, the reservoir abuts and drains through an ancient Welsh rainforest, which is a precious and unique fragment of Wales's wilder past. The drainage extends down ultimately to drain into the nearby estuary, again an important ecosystem on the North Welsh coast. The area is quite beautiful, and there are abundant footpaths and access land to explore as the site resides within the Snowdonia National Park. There is no information to indicate the possibility of radioactive contamination around the lake. Locals appear currently to be campaigning for the Magnox company to repair or replace the damaged footbridge which carries a footpath. This has been closed due to concerns about the integrity of the bridge. Hopefully they will prevail. I would encourage anyone to visit Trollsfinned. It is a fascinating and beautiful place with a rich landscape to explore. I do, however, remain conscious of the possible long-term implications of what has gone on at the Trollsfinned reactor, and hope that nobody is adversely impacted by its operation. It's key that, in the future, our practices harness nuclear energy for the clean and renewable resource it can be if done correctly. The site has been touted as a potential site for small modular reactors. However, as recently as May of this year, we have heard that the site has been deemed less suitable for this purpose, but that there is some potential for future nuclear redevelopment. Thank you for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are below.